In 1890, W. Duke and Sons became the most popular cigarette brand in the US. Not because they were the best, not because they were the cheapest, and probably not because of their ethical sourcing processes. But in 1885, they had started putting pictures of actresses in sexually provocative positions inside their cigarette packets. Sex doesn't just sell products, though. In 1886, the box office went wild when we saw the first ever sex scene in a film, The Kiss. You can't get copies of it anymore, I've tried. In the early 2000s, Game of Thrones picked up tons of viewers and accolades, became one of the global TV series to have the most amount of sex scenes in. And of course, for those of you who are interested, the world's oldest recorded profession, prostitution, started in 2400 BC in ancient Babylonia. So why, in this world where we're subjected to sexual innuendo in our offices and sex spam in our inboxes, and we see it on screen all the time, why are we having to sell sex ourselves inside our relationships? Because we are. Couples now have sex less than they did in the 1990s. And actually, fewer than half of UK couples describe themselves as satisfied or very satisfied with their sex lives, which is an uncomfortable truth. And what are we really getting wrong? Well, according to Men's Health, these are the 4 main culprits. Would we all agree? Yeah? Okay. Well, I agree but also disagree a little, because I think there's actually a bigger issue at play. And the bigger issue at play here is the fact that all of the interaction we have about sex from the wider world is this one-way communication. After all, we're always watching it, we are reading about it, we're hearing about it, sometimes we're even doing it. But we're not taught how to communicate about it productively. Why do we think that is? It's profit, okay? Think about it. 10 ways to spice up your sex life. 5 reasons your partner stopped having sex with you. The secret sex playbook that you must embrace for 2024. Likes, clicks, shares, advertising revenue, and profit. Our problematic sex lives have become a societal cash cow. And we're just sat here, drinking the Kool-Aid, right? And we learn these communications, and we get these communications from the wider world about sex to teach us how to interact with the rest of the world about it. And also to give us hang-ups and to stop us communicating about it with other people, because that's how the media is going to make their money. So, if we really wanted to have more frequent, more fulfilling sex lives, what are we supposed to do about it? Well, first we have to look at what we've been told about sex and understand how that's impacting the way that we interact with other people about it. Most of you, like me, will have first come across sex in a sex ed class, aged about 13. Uncomfortable, isn't it? Because girls go into one room and we learn how to accurately identify really weird anatomical diagrams. We get force-fed films about teen pregnancy and the stigmas of STIs, and boys, I imagine, go into another room and they identify fewer anatomical diagrams and watch a few episodes of The Magic School Bus. Of course, learning to put a condom on a banana is a universal experience. Now, I joke, but these early interactions that we have with sex teach us some quite interesting and dangerous things. They teach us that sex is functional, that it's about our biology and what our body is built to do. Perhaps more dangerously, they teach us that sex isn't a topic for public consumption, that sex is only safe to talk about with people who look and have the same biological makeup as we do. Interesting thought, right? So this just reinforces these gender stereotypes that we're fed from a very early age. And essentially, sex ed provides a young adult version of these stereotypes. For girls, sex is about reproduction. Women must want to reproduce, but not too early and not too late, because both of those things are bad. And women must also be interested in sex, but not too interested in sex, because the world says that women who are too interested in sex are slags, sluts, and whores. Score. For boys, it's slightly different, okay? For boys, sex is a method of impressing your mates, right? It's about following the pull of your hormones and having as much fun as possible before you settle down and become a good family man. And the world talks about boys who are interested in sex as being players, studs, and legends. Lucky. And unfortunately, our bodies reinforce these stereotypes further, because for men, it's just easier to have sex and have fun. You lucky ducks just need friction to get off, right? But for women, we have more complex biology. And apparently we need a 20,000 person survey and a gamified app to learn how to have an orgasm. Sex sells. This follows us into adulthood. Do you know, a few years ago, there was a lovely woman. She called it into a radio segment called Blown Off. She'd been on what she thought was a successful first date. They'd held hands. They'd agreed to meet again. And then he ghosted her. Modern love story, obviously. And the radio show hosts were just as confused as she was. So they called him to find out what had happened. And after a bit of back and forth, it transpired that he would admit that the date was great, but her number was just too high. That's right. The number of men that a single woman in her 30s had slept with was just too high for Paul, despite the fact that his body count was exactly the same. A week ago, I was on the internet, on Business Insider, talking about being child-free. Now, from the reaction of 700 angry commenters, you'd have thought I'd have stood on the internet screaming, "I love sex with my husband! I hate kids!" I didn't do that. You can check it out, it's fine. But sex in society is dangerous because society prefers it when we talk about sex according to reproduction and within our gendered norms. It's dangerous to do anything else. And that brings us on to our next big myth about sex, that we all think and feel and communicate about it in the same way. And we don't. Now, I'm going to take you back about, 15 years, 4 kilos, 3 to 4 boyfriends. And tell you that I was writing my dissertation on pornography, specifically on how the media represents women in pornography. And I learned a couple of really interesting things. You see, our bodies are different, and our biology makes having sex practically quite difficult. But our brains give us other problems to contend with, mainly stimulation and communication. So I'm guessing that everyone in this room has watched a porno at some point. Even if you don't want to admit it, that's fine. I'm also guessing that not everybody in this room has watched pornos with their friends, eaten Oreos on a suspiciously stained beige couch, whilst analysing them from a Freudian perspective. #drama student. Okay, so it's not everybody's favourite thing, but actually pornography is a really interesting resource to look at when we analyse our declining sex lives, for a few reasons. The first thing I would say is that watching pornography as part of a healthy lifestyle has never been proven to decrease activity inside your sex life. But it does teach us some other interesting things. One being that pornography is designed to appeal to the masses. Okay? It actually uses the hardwiring of our brains to appeal to the masses. Most of us in this room would admit to being primarily left or primarily right-brained. So for those of you who are left-brained, you would describe yourself as logical, numerate, analytical, highly spatially aware, good at parking. And that's good news, because pornography is for you. But for those of us who are right-brained, who would consider ourselves to be emotional connectors, good communicators, creatives, pornography doesn't do so much. And that's because the way in which our brains are hardwired means that we are stimulated differently. Left-brained individuals are visually stimulated. So they can get turned on by something as simple as walking into the kitchen and seeing their partner bend down and unload the dishwasher. Even with unwashed hair and week-old leggings, it's great. But right-brained individuals, they need emotional connection to instigate intimacy with their partner. So if they are the one unloading the dishwasher and their partner just walks past with no offer of help or thanks, well, lefty's not getting laid. Laugh at my own jokes, God, embarrassing. But it also teaches us and reinforces some lessons that we learn about communication, because after all, because pornography is a visual resource, there's no communication, there's no conversation, there's no connection, it's just the action. And usually that action is a woman in some kind of plumbing disaster, a man races in, saves the day, and she just has to have sex with him. There's no conversation, there's no communication about it. They just both want the same thing at the exact same time. How often does that happen in real life? There's literally nothing. Like, there's no question, whether or not now is really a good time to have the orgy, or whether or not our washing machine really will survive being sat on. Nothing. And that is because it's not real. Right? And logically, we know this, that pornography is not real. After all, it's an entertainment resource. It's scripted, loosely. It's designed for aesthetic, for profit, because sex sells. But we're all using it as an educational resource to learn how to behave, how to sound, how to look, because we don't want to admit that we don't really know. And we don't want to ask our partners about it either. Controversially, I'm not blaming the porn industry for this. They never said they were making documentaries about healthy sex lives. David Attenborough is not voicing over the foreplay. Our bodies are different and they're stimulated differently. And our brains are different and are stimulated and communicate differently. But the main resources that we use as primary information about sex, like pornography and films and books, never tell us that. Staying in a situation where your sex life is struggling is really difficult, not just for your ego, but also for your relationship overall. Because couples who have more frequent and fulfilling sex, they secrete chemicals, happy chemicals like oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, so they increase feelings of intimacy and love and connection with their partner. It's also really good for our health, apparently. Ask your PT. But seriously, it will help you decrease stress, increase quality sleep, and potentially help increase your immunity as well. And finally, for our job prospects. Couples who have more fulfilled sex lives report higher levels of job satisfaction and increased productivity. So next time you want a promotion, you know what to do. But here's the thing. In a world where we're taught that sex is great, where we're shown it all the time, where we're told to do it more often, why is it so weird and awkward to talk to your partner about? I'd wager that for most people in this room, talking about your sex life with your partner is way more vulnerable than contorting yourself into various hilarious positions and actually doing it, right? For the last 10 years, I've been teaching people how to have difficult conversations about emotionally charged topics that leave them open to conflict, make them feel vulnerable, make them feel uncomfortable. That's right. For the last 10 years, I've run a sales training consultancy. And I've trained over 20,000 people how to have conversations about topics like money, pitching, negotiation, boundaries. Negative feedback comes up quite a lot. All things that are awkward, uncomfortable, panic-inducing. And society tells us to shy away from conversations like this, specifically saying we should avoid conversations about things like money, religion, and politics because they cause conflict when they're done badly. And that's why I think we should actually learn how to have better conversations about these things, learn how to successfully navigate them, as it were. Understanding, for example, that when you have a conversation about sex is just as important as what you actually end up saying. You know, it's uncomfortable, isn't it, saying to your partner, hey, let's have a conversation about our sex life this weekend, but nothing drops a hand grenade on your relationship or your sex life quicker than texting them about your sexual dissatisfaction while you're at work, and that happens more often than you'd think. Not in my relationship, obviously. The other thing that we have to think about is that sex as an act is passionate, right? But conversations about it are not. Who in here has organised a wedding ever? Yeah? Okay, then you're with me. Your wedding day is the most magical day of your life, but the run-up to it, full of boring conversations about practicalities that you just have to iron out. Weirdly, they also correlate with conversations about sex. Things like, who'll be there? When will it happen? What do we really want? And weirdly, how much will it cost? But any good salesperson will tell you that practicalities are key when you're having any kind of discussion. They help you set a scope. They stop you overcomplicating, overcompensating, and being overwhelmed. Practicalities are really good in a world where we live, that pornography and films and books, they teach us that sex should always be spontaneous, right? But that's really difficult if you have kids or pets, a fear of rejection, or windows that face the street. So talking about practicalities is good. For example, I'm useless at most things after 3 p.m, but also sex, because I'm a carbs girl. And that afternoon slump really hits me hard. So I'm sitting on my sofa and vegging out afterwards. I'm not doing anything else. Language is important too. Sex is a team sport. So if you use blame language like, you never have sex with me anymore, that's guaranteed to get you going solo. But if you ask open questions, if you genuinely listen to your partner, if you come to situations as a team using we-focused language, you can get the outcome that you want a lot easier. Things like saying, hey, we haven't been able to prioritize sex this month. Can we talk about it? Because I really miss connecting with you. It goes a long way and it's very different in terms of reaction. And then finally, and this is the awkward one, we have to agree outcomes and review them regularly. There's literally no point in having the conversation if you're not going to do anything about it. And I get that talking about sex is uncomfortable, but the more you do it, the easier it gets. So here's the thing. I know talking about sex is uncomfortable. Believe me, I'm right here doing it. But it's really important because sex sells for a reason. It's fun. It connects us. It's good for us. And how we do one thing is how we do everything. So if we can communicate about something as difficult and open and vulnerable as sex, imagine how we could apply that to other areas of our lives. We could negotiate better deals at work. We could share our real opinions at the pub. We could finally tell our in-laws that their Christmas turkey is dry and that we will be taking our own. The list is endless. Perhaps more importantly, we could rewrite the societal communications rulebook for us and for the next generation. Teaching the next generation how to communicate using best practice strategies for themselves, for their personal and professional lives, being able to advocate for themselves in any given situation. Teaching them that sex is fun, that sex connects us in our relationships, and that it's not all just weird anatomical diagrams and feeling like you have to do it to fit in, or, I don't know, putting condoms on fruit. Thank you.